Well, hello, that's me again. Today is February 7th. It's Wednesday. It's a hump day. And let me start with what everybody knows about, but let me comment on this, and then we'll proceed with this hypersonic business, so to speak. But we'll start with the confirmation of the basically the Tucker-Carlson interviewing Mr. Putin, and I have the first photos from this meeting. And as you can see yourself, you have Mr. Carlson. Here it is. He interviews Mr. Putin, and if somebody doesn't get the joke, actually this is Carlson, who lives on the roof, a beloved character of the Soviet and Russian cartoon, which came out first in 1968, and my generation grew up with the series of these cartoons, which was the Junior or the Kid and Carlson Returns, and this is after the wonderful book by Astrid Lindgren, a Swedish kids writer. She was also the author of the Pippi Longstockings, and Russians love Carlson, and this has been reflected on so many levels, including the horrendous remake of this cartoon, which is now a classic. And what can I say? It is wonderful, and now, obviously, as you might understand, Russians being the specialists in memes, this whole thing with Putin and Carlson is going around, but we know, of course, that Mr. Carlson indeed, and I'm talking now about Tucker-Carlson, basically Kremlin confirms now that Carlson has interviewed Mr. Putin, and the footage is being prepared for broadcast today. Dmitry Peskov confirmed it, just fresh from this printing press, so to speak, and we will see it. Well, when we will see it, of course, it's going to be at the tuckercarlson.com, and it's as he already stated that it's Mr. Musk, graciously allowed to use X platform for this interview to be aired. But the question, obviously, is not about the interview per se. I mean, obviously, Tucker, being in many respects independent journalist, we will know pretty much what Putin has to say about things, because Tucker, I'm pretty sure, being a master journalist, a real journalist, he will ask proper questions. That the issue here is why such hysteria around this whole interview, with some morons from the European Union even threatening to boycott or cancel Carlson in terms of his travel to the European Union. So much for democracy, isn't it? And the question obviously is answered in a very simple manner. They are afraid of truth. They're absolutely hysterical, and for them, especially showing Mr. Putin, as some of the posters on my discussion boards on my blog noted today, seeing the man in his 70s being vital, being absolutely mentally sharp and humorous, as Mr. Putin is, and being cool, because he is known as a cool dude around the world, except obviously in Washington, D.C., or maybe they do know. And one of the reasons, of course, for this, they're scared, basically, crapless, so to speak, is because the comparison will be not only warranted, it will be irresistible, comparing him to the POTUS, the President of the United States, who doesn't even understand or remembers where he is, and everybody understands, who have any brains left in the United States, that actually Biden is just merely a front figure. And then suddenly they have the guy who is judoka, and who is in excellent shape, mental and physical, and he actually has a real appeal to women. And guess what? It's absolutely true, and the guy is he's a cool dude, okay, Mr. Putin. So the comparison will be so not in favor that I cannot even basically express enough how much it troubles and bothers those bunch of neocons and Israeli firsters who actually control Biden. And then there you go, you have the guy. And of course now, this guy will be talking about what everybody understands now, even including the horse in US media, from Washington Post to New York Times. They still continue to lie, but they cannot deny actually the reality of what is happening on the front lines in what is former Ukraine, and the front of the armed forces of Ukraine is disintegrating. Now we have the news that SBU, which is the security service of Ukraine, they are afraid that there could be riots in Kiev, actually, if they remove Mr. Zaluzhny from whatever, the command of his hapless armed forces, and actually if Zelensky makes this step, which obviously was inspired primarily by Victoria Nuland, who went to Kiev a few days ago to settle this issue, because obviously it doesn't play well for neocons in Washington, D.C. But the problem is, as many people ask me, and I give interviews here and there. Yesterday I spoke with my good friend Nima about it. I mean, what it means that Zaluzhny is, some removed or whatever, the Zelensky is, back on the horse, so to speak. Doesn't matter. It makes no difference whatsoever, especially with the fact that Russians are actually cleaner. It's a mop-up operation, essentially, right now, in terms of Avdiivka. And with Avdiivka, there is a lot of strategic implications and ramifications for all this situation. When Avdiivka falls, it's not if, it's when. It's just a matter of how Russians want to preserve its personnel. Unlike Ukrainian cannon fodder, Russia does care about personnel. But again, American generals don't know, because they run the whole thing in terms of the operational planning, because armed forces of Ukraine and its best staffers, so to speak, many of them have been actually killed or basically disabled. So what they have left is, I wouldn't call it really competent military for their warfare. And the question is not just, for example, Zaluzhny wanted to abandon Avdiivka, which is anybody, even a lieutenant fresh from the military academy, would have understood that. It's just the fact that they're just not that good. They don't know how to actually handle whatever little left is there in terms of the combat capability. Make no mistake, I'm not talking about sheer numbers. They still have some numbers, but of course the quality of the numbers of the armed forces of Ukraine are extremely low. And this is what I was talking about in my previous video about the correlation of forces and means, because you can have actually the same number of forces but the same number of equipment, but because of the quality of personnel and issues of training and morale and other things which influence combat performance, the other force could be actually 3-4 times more correlated in favor of that force, better than the opposing force. So, and this is the thing which, for example, people in neocons cannot grasp. They cannot wrap their brains around it, and that's why they desperately try to kill every last man and in Ukraine. And if that hasn't been enough, we have the situation that actually we have this news which tells you everything you need to know. Basically, yesterday the Ukrainian Military Registration and Enlistment Office, which are basically good old Soviet military commissariats, offered, well, actually it's not offered, let's read attentively what is stated here. Roman Istomin, a representative of the Poltava Regional Military Registration and Enlistment Office, suggested that underage boys who went abroad return to Ukraine to register for military service. Oh, we have Hitler Youth, Hitler Jugend coming back. And he said that we will not send letters, for example, abroad that he must appear. In general, yes, he should return to Ukraine. If he is still a citizen, he is subject to registration. So they say that by age of 17, they have to enlist, basically, well, register, and that's basically preparation of the lowering of the age of the recruits to 17 and 16 officially now. Evidently, they passed their mobilization, yet another mobilization legislation in Rada in Kiev, Rada being the so-called parliament there. And so they talk about that since February 2022, general mobilizations have been announced and repeatedly extended in Ukraine. The document, for example, which is new version of the bill on the mobilization, the document in particular contains a norm that any consular services for men from 18 to 60 years old will be provided only if they have military registration documents. So yeah, they are basically scratching the bottom of the barrel, and obviously it doesn't bother these people who basically brought Ukraine into this catastrophe. That's how good, quote unquote, they are in terms of foreign policy and military planning, but we knew it was coming for a long time now. So now can you imagine when Mr. Putin comes out and begins to express basically well-known fact for people who have at least, who have brain left and are not completely brainwashed. So for some people, including women. And as already stated, some people in my blog said, hey, women also will be attracted. Well, they will be attracted to the guy who is vital at his 70s, and he radiates power. And many people, they do love power, especially, American journalists, they love power. They don't care about what kind of power. So, but that's also the thing. The confidence and physical fitness is extremely important here. And that is what we know so far about this. But because we are into this very interesting, what is called, I don't remember the chess term for this in the conclusion of the game, in terms of military, we can actually state that even Washington now, it's like really surprising. Yesterday, even the White House has acknowledged the military nature of the targets that Russia is hitting in Ukraine. And suddenly we have the people who coming out in the White House and they say that, John Kirby, this admiral, the guy who wouldn't know how to command a freaking rowing boat, but still he's an admiral. Yet, even he yesterday comes out and he talks about what essentially debunks the two-year-long Ukrainian and US media propaganda. And he says, especially in these winter months, we see continued strikes by Russian drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles, which attack in particular two groups of targets in Ukraine. The first is obviously military units, but the military-industrial complex of Ukraine is also specifically and directly attacked. That's what Mr. Kirby said. And you have to wonder what the hell is going on there? What happened? What did change in this whole situation that suddenly they talk about what Russians were doing from the get-go? Yeah, accidentally sometimes, not deliberately, unlike it was the case and is the case with the armed forces of Ukraine and their curators from Washington, D.C. and London, who actually love to see Russian civilians killed. And basically, armed forces of Ukraine have been characterized by Mr. Putin as the terrorist organization. This is the only thing they know how to do, to fight defenseless civilians and shooting at them. But even Kirby suddenly comes out and says, well, yeah, Russians actually, just target basically military targets, legitimate military targets. So if there have been civilian deaths as the result of Russian strikes and operations, they were unintentional. And when you look at the numbers of the civilians killed tragically in Ukraine, you can compare this, and it has been compared by the basically atrocity which is committed by Israel in Gaza Strip, indiscriminate killing of the civilians, and actually they kill more children than Russians killed civilians throughout the whole 2 years of the special military operation. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. So suddenly Kirby comes out and says that, and this is very important. It is indicative of something which is going there. Well, something which is going there is preparation to, face the music, and the music is the destruction of Ukraine as the state as we speak. It's happening, and obviously removal of the basically Nazi regime. And then, of course, we have suddenly Germans coming out. The Germany said that they had reached the limits. This was announced at the briefing in Berlin by a representative of German Defense Ministry. I think Germany has exhausted everything that could be done, especially in the context of industry. Of course, we can conclude additional agreements, but we are at the limit of what is feasible today. And now to supply Ukraine with. They want to supply Ukraine with the air defense systems, Iris-T, whatever the name of them. They will be also annihilated, and basically Germany throws out the white flag. And when you take a look and this whole situation, you also can look at what was published in the Financial Times just recently, a few days ago, and based on the International Monetary Fund. And look at this. You can compare the growth of they call it G7. I don't think so Russia has to be associated with G7 because with the exception of the US and Japan, the other G7 economies are not even in the same league as Russia. But look at this. Russia shows a very robust and the best among developed nations economic growth. So there you go. And in this particular case, what can I add? I mean, look at Germany. It shows the negative growth, but yeah, whatever. So, and that brings us a little bit, so to speak, to the memory lane. Let's kind of travel by the memory lane, and I want to show you what I will start with. Brian Berletich. Funny thing, actually, we evidently approached it almost simultaneously, but Brian yesterday, I believe, he posted this on X. Forbes quotes Andrew Perpetua, I like the name, Perpetua, who has been claiming Russia will be out of tanks next month for the last year. In March 2023, he claimed Russia would be out of tanks by June-July 2023, which he concluded would be when Ukraine launched their offensive. The rest is history. Absolutely. It is the history. And one of the reasons I also concentrate on that, because look at this. Let's go back down to the memory lane, and this is independent. Look at this. It's Monday, 8th of May. Officially so-called counteroffensive, which is not counteroffensive. It was the offensive by armed forces of Ukraine and people who actually supported them. And look at this. It was started in June, but prior to this. It's the first in the military history of humanity when the major strategic operation was announced and advanced. And look at this. Ukraine says whole of Russia will panic when counteroffensive begins. They will suffer the consequences. And it was stated by Deputy Defense Minister of Ukraine, Vladimir Havrilov. Basically, his full quote looks like this. We will launch our counteroffensive. When and where, it doesn't matter now, he said. And when that happens, Russia will be in panic. You will see a lot of panic. They still don't understand that their propaganda is demonstrating a false picture of what is actually happening on the ground. This war will be won on the ground, not on the TV screens, not on the internet. And Mr. Gavrilov, of course, claimed that at that time Russia suffered 200,000 casualties. And even Independent, which is I believe it's British tabloid, they said, yeah, you cannot independently confirm these things, but hey, whatever. And remarkably, I agree with Mr. Gavrilov here. I agree entirely, except for basically it is Ukraine which is in panic, and it's a 180 degree, or in Annalena Baerbock's basically alternative universe, it is 360 degrees opposite. And this is obviously he talked about Ukraine, not understanding that he's talking about Ukraine and NATO, and they are in panic. And as you understand that they still don't understand that their propaganda is demonstrating a false picture of what is actually happening on the ground. Absolutely. Basically, for 2 years, Biden administration and all corporate American and Western media, they were lying. non-stop. I mean, they lied about everything. And, well, including, of course, those famous things about state of Putin having 7 types of cancer, soiling himself while falling on the stairs and things of this nature. So it's a kind of typical of the British, for example, journalists. This is what they do. The only thing they are good at, for example, is how to discuss the, lingerie of Camilla or what have you. I mean, this is the complete bottom of the bottom. It's a human trash who have no honor or integrity, and they lied. They lied non-stop, and suddenly they begin to face their reality. And of course, I specifically brought you down this memory lane to remind you that these were the people who were telling us that they will go and, Russia will be in panic, and, exactly opposite had happened. And this is not just miscalculation. We know it is miscalculation on the historic level. It is miscalculation which brought the combined West down. It accelerated its downfall to such a degree I cannot even describe to you how fast it all achieved it. My book, which I'm crossed the equator, so to speak, in writing it, is precisely about it. It's the fact which, for example, average Washington bureaucrat, average graduate of the Ivy League in humanities doesn't understand the connection between the battlefield and geopolitical balance of forces. They simply have no concept of it. They don't have toolkit. In fact, is when you think about it, many American generals and admirals don't have this toolkit. So because they do not understand how the combat, starting from the tactical level up to the operational and strategic, affects all of that. How it unifies itself, coalesces into this whole thing, which we know as geopolitics or geopolitical situation currently in the world. And since we are at the down the memory lane, let me also show something which is very crucial here. It's absolutely crucial. Let me get you, actually it's 3 years ago, you can look it up, and this is one of the videos on the YouTube. It says it's 2 years, in fact it's 3 years ago, in 2021, and look at this what they state. And it was stated actually on all media. I just chose the YouTube to show you that Lockheed Martin delivered new Dark Eagle hypersonic missile to the US Army. And the question here is, okay, so they say that they delivered new Dark Eagle hypersonic missile, which doesn't exist in nature. They do not even have proper prototype, which could be at least judged or assessed as semi, so to speak, successful. And guess what? It became so, the failure is so into your face. The failure of the, well, we spoke about this and speak about this constantly, about the situation with the failure of the Western equipment, Western hardware, apart from the operational concepts, which is, as already stated, it's a whole science. But, I mean, technologically, the NATO have been exposed for what it is. It's just absolutely humiliating to lose that, all those, advanced and, so much advertised systems, which absolutely practically do not work. Again, as I spoke to Nima yesterday, when the actual combat effectiveness of this, as Ukrainians called it, holy javelins have been exposed as being 20%, I'm sorry. You cannot even talk seriously about this weapon system. It's garbage, basically. And we have this across the board. And so now we have that we move to this hypersonic issue, which United States is lagging behind Russia, not just by years. The question is not by years. Even if to imagine that this Dark Eagle, allegedly, hypersonic gliding body, will be a vehicle, will be somehow, achieved this year, I don't think so it will, but hey, don't quote me on that. I don't have any clearance, and even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. But the point is that, yeah, this is already the older version, so to speak. And here is what Russian diplomats had to react today, because it's becoming ridiculous. Look at this. It's today, And Mr. Yermakov, Vladimir Yermakov, spoke about it today, and the United States is trying to downplay the potential of Russian weapons. Has been unable to catch up with Russia in the development of the hypersonic systems. Vladimir Yermakov, the director of the Russian Foreign Ministry Non-Proliferation and Arms Control Department, said in their interview with TASS. And he points out what I point out for years now. It is the sour grapes, it is butthurt, and here it is. With regard to hypersonic systems, the Americans feel clearly aggrieved. For several years now, they have been trying unsuccessfully to catch up with Russia in the field of hypersonic systems, but they have not yet created a single satisfactory and properly tested prototype. Hence their attempts to belittle the potential of Russian systems, he said. Absolutely. If you read many of their, even professional publications, you can see the sour grapes is oozing from there. Russians first used Kinzhal. It's one of many Russian hypersonic systems. They used Kinzhal first time at 18th March 2022, which penetrated almost 60 meters of the ground and exploded in the old Soviet storages, arsenals, which was used by the armed forces of Ukraine to store their ammunition. Well, there you go. And then, of course, we have the issue of those patriots being basically killed in batches by Kinzhals, and Kinzhal is now the most battle-tested, proven hypersonic system. You have Zircon coming now, which is, of course, 3M22 and ship-based, and it's already being deployed on the first line, what is called Russian ships, such as the frigates of the Gorshkov class, Project 22350, and of course updated Marshal Shapashnikov class, which is older Udaloy class, and then we have now the class of the corvettes, Project 2385, which are coming out, and they are carriers of the Zircon. I mean, there is nothing which NATO has, nothing, not even in the works, which can stop it. They can't. And then, of course, they cannot stop the single one, and they cannot, let alone to stop their, basically, salvo. And then it's not just that. And when people say, how could this be? America is the greatest and all that. Well, it hasn't been the greatest for a couple of decades now, I'm sorry, guys. Because everything have been actually squandered. Everything have been brought to the altar of the woke ideology. And Israel firsters, who basically squandered America's resources on the absolutely unnecessary and stupid, Middle East wars. And technologically, United States, as I already stated, you can quote me and you can refer to me and say, Andrei Martyanov stated that actually United States lost the arms race. And the question is not, even if they somehow create this dark eagle thing, Russia already deploys the plethora, the arsenal of hypersonic weapons, which United States is nowhere near. And again, if you look at Zircon, my gosh, that's the end of the surface navies as we know. And now when they see the combat performance of those weapon systems, of course they are shocked. Of course they are butthurt. Of course they have sour grapes. And again, it's not enough to have the strike system. You have to have a defensive system. And United States never graduated even from the anti-shipping missile, which is truly supersonic. United States never has been able to create supersonic anti-shipping missiles, while what Russia was deploying anti-shipping missiles, which already were flying with the Mach 1 point up to Mach 1.5, already in the end of 60s. When you look at the, especially Malachite missiles, including the first missile, cruise missile, which was with the underwater start. So you cannot jump, several steps ahead. You need to have those precious and proverbial data sets to develop things. And nobody gives the United States data sets what Russians basically accumulated over the last 50 years, operating supersonic anti-shipping missiles of the different varieties, including, of course, with the pinnacle of them, which is the P-800 Onyx. It's a Mach 2.6 missile, which is capable with these elements of the artificial intellect, which already have been used in the P700 Granite missiles. And then, of course, you have 3M54 caliber. It's almost Mach 3 missile at the terminal. They are smart missiles. They talk between each other within the salvo. They basically operate any way you want them operate. And then, of course, there is this fundamental issue. How do you control hypersonic weapon, which flies in the cocoon of plasma? How? Well, that's the main trick. Well, materials also is the main trick. And CIA was trying to get and recruit all those scientists who work on the materials used in such systems as Kinjal or Zircon, let alone Avangard, for years. And some of them have been caught by FSB. So in this particular case, what can I say? I mean, they can try whatever they want, but you cannot jump generations. As I already stated, it's a very difficult issue, and you need to have the really what is called the school. And by school, I don't mean just public school. We need to school of the design and thought, engineering thought, which brings you this type of the weaponry and this type capability. But again, you can quote me, it's in my books, and I've been saying this all along for many years. In the second decade now, American weapons have been made for sale. Russian weapons are made to kill. And this is the fundamental difference. It's metaphysical one, and it cannot be breached. It cannot be basically reconciled in any way. You have to have a completely different set. You have your head screwed on in a very specific way to be able to do so. But in conclusion today, so I want to show you this, and this is I mean, it's hilarious. And this is why America, you know what? America has a chance, unlike Europe. And again, I understand Europeans may not like it, but here it is. This is why this is unbelievable. This is the historical first. In Nevada, in Republican presidential primary caucus, Nikki Haley was only one on the ballot. Okay? And she still lost in the landslide to people who voted against everybody else. So you have to really try to lose this way. I don't know. Can she take this humiliation? I don't think so she can take this. But again, this tells you actually the mood of the American people, many of American people. So, and that is why I'm saying, do not discount hoi polloi. They are not as stupid as you might think. And that's always a process of educating public, but this was a delightful news actually, and this is what I wanted to tell you today. So, and as always guys, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel, and those who can afford it, please support me on Patreon and buy me a coffee or two. This allows me to do what I am doing. And this is everything I wanted to tell you today guys. Have a nice rest of your weekend. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.